Hey everybody, how you doing? It's the Storm Rider, and today we have another episode of the podcast. This episode is called What Addiction Feels Like, and in it I'm going to talk about what addiction feels like. And I'm going to be using the TV show The Boys, which came out on Amazon Prime. It's all about superheroes and takes a critical lens looking at them. I'm going to use that to shed light on what addiction feels like. All right. So, The Storm Rider is my publication on Substack, and you can subscribe to it. You can comment and let me know what you like or how you feel about some of the things I've written and some of the things I've talked about on my podcast. You can also catch me on Spotify, and you can catch me on a number of other networks, but I'm still setting that up. You're invited to comment, you're invited to subscribe and support me any way you can, and I'd love to hear from you. So whether you comment on Spotify or you comment on another network, I'd love to hear from you. All right, let's get into it. Without further ado, let's read What Addiction Feels Like. Okay, I've already wrote this, so I'm going to be reading it as it is, but I can stop and comment from time to time. Sister Sage from The Boys tells us what addiction feels like, and it's genius. All right, so let me just jump in. When I first saw this depiction, it clicked for me that this is what she's doing is really similar to what we do when we want to change our brain or affect our brain in some way. So let me get right into it, but this is what we're going to talk about. Sister Sage and the Ever-Growing Brain. I really like Sister Sage's character in The Boys. I especially relate to a scene in Season 4 involving Sage and her need to hard reset parts of her brain, even if it makes her into a fool for a few hours. In this scene, Sister Sage asks the water boy, aka the Deep, to jam an ice pick into her brain via the inner side of her ocular cavity just next to her nose. Sage is requesting a temporary lobotomy because her brain regenerates constantly. And if the Deep doesn't do this, the pressure on her skull actually hurts. All right. After the Deep administers the operation, the brain damage makes her a fool for a few hours. She doesn't mind. She enjoys a few hours of ignorant bliss as a flighty little sex kitten who likes action movies and popcorn. I may not be a genius, but I'm not a total rule follower either. Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence identifies 8 types of intelligence. I know I have strong spatial and creative intelligence. I gained a little bit of musical intelligence by playing guitar in my college years, and lots of kinesthetic intelligence by dancing salsa for more than a decade. However, I was a great improviser because of the visual and spatial intelligence, and a terrible routine follower because of my poor logical and mathematical brain. My intelligence is overly pronounced in a few areas, leaving me with a deficit in other types of intelligence. At times, those deficits made a fool of me, and I often lacked the requisite social or emotional or linguistic skills to explain myself to others. Unwritten social expectations were never my strong suit, and I always had a hard time fitting in. In the series, Sage is an intellectual genius. Sometimes I felt like a genius in the arts. I'll say that again. I sometimes felt like a genius in the art studio, but she's an actual genius, on the order of Einstein or Lex Luthor. I'm just someone with lots of visual ideas in my head, and it's agonizing to have them all bouncing around in there without an outlet where I can assemble them. Sage's brain is constantly growing and regenerating, so much so that if she doesn't jam an ice pick in there every now and then and mush up some brain matter, the intracranial pressure becomes overwhelming. I can definitely relate to this idea. I think we all have powerful brains with so many thoughts and ideas swimming around. Okay, Bentley, come on, let's go. Down you go. You're not in a good spot. My cat was too close to the computer. All right, we keep going. What did I say? I can deeply relate to this idea. I think that we all have powerful brains and with so many thoughts and ideas swimming around. Sometimes we just want to dampen the noise and enjoy ourselves. All right. With so many thoughts and ideas swimming around, sometimes we just want to enjoy the noise and dampen the noise and enjoy ourselves. Yes, and enjoy the noise too. The threat of a shoe. I'll never forget one day in 2014 being a new teacher at a new teacher orientation for staff. We teachers were given a small piece of paper and asked to draw something that represents our vision for the next school year. We just had to draw an icon, nothing fancy. I don't remember what I drew, but all I can remember from that day is when a reading specialist wanted to draw a sneaker. She wanted to draw a basketball sneaker, but the task of structuring the drawing almost brought her to tears. She started to break down as I watched. Her face fell, her shoulders dropped. She stared down at the threatening blank space of the Post-it note. Maybe she hoped a shoe would just show up on paper, so she wouldn't have to draw it. On the verge of tears and an emotional breakdown brewed. I stood transfixed, watching the shock come over her face. Wow, she really can't see the shoe the way I can. How can someone grow up without being able to represent a simple item like a shoe visually? She's freezing up. I have to help her. I stepped in, and I coached her through it. We sat together. I helped her think of the toe of the shoe and what that might be shaped like. Then I helped her think of the high top of the shoe. I reminded her of the laces in the sneakers, in the heel of the sneaker. Drawing a shoe is just drawing different parts and fitting them together. Eventually we got through it, and she had a shoe drawing in front of her. Now, have you ever been asked to do something, like a cognitive task, that made you freeze up? And what was it, and how did it go? You can leave me a comment. You can leave me a comment on Substack, or you can leave me a comment anywhere on social media where you can get this podcast. This experience shot straight to my heart and reminded me of why I became an educator. Unfortunately, it's very common for adults to be unable to draw simple things. Lots of people grow up without basic drafting skills, and they tell you, I can't draw a circle to save my life. That has a lot to do with our message in education. Over the past 30 years, we've given the public a few misleading messages about learning and the brain. We've told them all that people should possess language and interpersonal skills. But mathematics and science is for smart people, and visual intelligence is for fancy art weirdos who eventually want to start a punk band. Another message people receive in childhood is that the arts are inborn talents which can't be taught, but math and literacy skills which you have to teach, but math and literacy are skills which you have to teach and study. So why even have art teachers then? I want to take a pause and I want to explain my joke. So my characterization is that back when I was of college age and near art school, even when I was 28, I was doing a program that was connected to a fine arts school. So I was in and out of a fine arts school. And it was still that culture where if you're going to be an artist, you're probably going to be a white guy or a white girl. You're probably going to be, from the punk rock subculture or hipster or something like that. You had to subscribe to the subculture. You didn't really have to subscribe to the subculture, but you feel like you have to subscribe to the subculture. So it's a joke I'm making about that. Like artists for artsy hipstery kids who are going to go into music, and a lot of kids that go to art school go into music. Okay, that's true. That actually does happen because you have the audience, you have the mindset. Art school kids need to do something fun on the weekend to entertain themselves. They're not going to entertain themselves by making art, right? So actually, it does happen sometimes. It can happen. That crossover is real. All right, so back to the story. That experience reinforced my conviction that drawing and structuring spatially are forms of intelligence. All right, so I got an image on my stack. So if you want to enjoy the images, you got to go to the article. So you got to go to thestormwriter.substack.com, and I have an image on here called the Magnificent Five, and it's one of my images from back in the days when I used to make fine art superheroes, and I designed a character called the Untitled Man, made from wearable art, cotton, fabric paint, foam, poly putty is like a polymer, like Bondo, and other things. So I made these masks and things like that. So go see that image. You got to go to the Substack. Failure to launch. Despite my failure to launch my career as an artist, I think that my colleagues knew that my work was brimming with visual intelligence. In some ways, that made things worse. I don't think the buttoned-down careerist arts administrators of the East Coast wanted to put up with another Diego Rivera type. Certainly not in the information age. The time of the messianic artist with an ego that shines as bright as his imagination has really passed. Humble, self-effacing artists are all the rage these days. Diego Rivera was one of the greatest muralists of all time. Additionally, he was a communist ideologue and an avid womanizer. Even though porn addiction is everywhere and affects 1 in 6 people, most gallerists would probably prefer to uplift a womanizer's career than that of a porn addict. At least the former is the type where we all know what to expect. Regarding the latter, I'm not so special. We're really everywhere, like cockroaches. I mean, I think the stigma that comes with this addiction is the idea that you must be a chauvinist, right? You must be, you're objectifying women if you're acting out, if you're looking at this. So therefore, you must be someone who objectifies women by default, not out of illness, right? Fundamentally. That you objectify women fundamentally instead of clinically or out of disease, right? So that's, I think, what the key is here is that the art world right now is very conservative in the sense that, yes, it represents the left, but the left can be conservative when it comes to fear about consequences for supporting the wrong person or supporting someone who it's hard to explain, who isn't progressive in the way that who doesn't have a clean image, right? You have to be progressive in a clean way. You can't be progressive in a dirty way. How do I put that? So whatever turns people off is bad, and whatever turns people on is good. And, some of that is really reasonable. Like, why would you want to, let's say someone's a racist or an anti-Semite or a homophobe. Do you really want to help them improve their career, even though they're an amazing artist? I mean, probably not. But so this gets lumped in with that, and then you can be a really amazing artist, but if there's some bad image of you, it's going to hurt your career. Yeah, that's the reality of it. Anyway, so it's kind of like that. So that's why we're educating, and we're like providing new and updated education on mental illness so that it's not stigmatized and assumptions are not made. And that's why we're here today. Okay, We're everywhere, like cockroaches. I think for the millions of addicts all over the world, acting out is their way of jamming an ice pick into their brain and shutting it down for a while. While we're using, most addicts describe the experience or the feeling in one word: oblivion. The addict is either in a sense of oblivion for a few hours or searching for that feeling again. That's what keeps them coming back. It might be fair to characterize addicts as geniuses. Some certainly are, but that's besides the point. They're all used to overclocking their brains, smart or not, and need to find some way to downshift. Addicts who haven't found a better or more meaningful way to unwind use their addiction to slow way down. Sometimes they get to dangerously slow speeds, and sometimes the brain won't start up again when it needs to. That can lead to terrible decisions and serious consequences that are different for every person. As I said before, Sage's weakness is that she needs to obliterate parts of her brain in order to survive. And I think that addicts with their own overclocked frontal lobes feel the same way. In Season 4 of Episode 6, Sage, despite her intellectual gifts, fumbles the ball when she's needed most. Sage gets shot in the... Okay, this is a spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. So mute or fast forward some minutes or whatever you got to do, but this is a spoiler alert, so I don't want to ruin it for you. Sage gets shot in the head after a showdown with Mother's Milk at the residency of a very powerful and politically connected soup. And her temporary lobotomy happens to coincide with the most important meeting of Homelander's life. She's rendered a cake-devouring idiot as Homelander tries to sell his government takeover to a handful of Washington elites. Victoria Newman steps up to the plate and takes over for Sage, and you can watch the rest of the series and see how that worked out for her. It isn't exactly Sage's fault that she got shot in the head, but nonetheless, that unexpected injury turns her into a fun-loving dummy for a few hours, and her team botches a very serious political takeover. How many times has addiction, the dampener of the overclocked brain, made a fun-loving dummy out of you or me when I needed my wits about me most? Has this ever happened to you? I want to know. All right, that is the story. Thank you all for listening to the Stormwriter podcast. And I'm really excited about how the podcast has grown. I don't consider myself to be anyone special, but I think I have interesting stories and experiences to tell, share, and impart to you all. And if I can do that in these little podcasts, it really makes me happy. I find it very fulfilling. So love to hear from you. Love to hear what you think. On my Substack article, which you can read, you're going to see some images. That includes an image of the character. You're going to see an image that represents Gardner's theory of intelligences. And you're going to read, well, you'll see a drawing. You'll see a photograph, a composite photograph that I created. One of Diego Rivera's murals called Diego Rivera, Detroit Industry at the DIA. You can join the Stormwriters subscriber chat, the subscriber chat. We can make that one word, subscriber chat. And actually, I have 3 images that I threw in from students, from former students, from like 8 years ago. Hasn't really been that long, from 8 years ago. So you can check that out. And I would love to hear from you. So have a great weekend, I suppose, or have a great week, or whenever you hear this. Enjoy whatever you're enjoying. And I'll see you next time, or you'll hear me next time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.